It was the morning of my daughter's birthday, a day I thought would be filled with laughter and warmth. Instead, I found myself standing in the kitchen, a crumpled envelope clutched in my hand as she stared at me with a mixture of anger and hurt. The handwriting on the envelope, unmistakably hers yet older, like a memory from 3 years ago I had tried to forget. I had not seen her like this in over a decade, her voice sharp, her eyes accusing, as if I had betrayed her in some unforgivable way. The kitchen smelled faintly of her favorite vanilla candles, a scent that always reminded me of her childhood, now twisted into tension. On the counter, a simple key lay next to a forgotten photograph of her as a little girl, smiling with innocent trust I feared I had lost forever. My heart raced. Could I have failed her without knowing it? The thought of losing her forever, even just for a day, made my chest tighten. And yet I knew this confrontation was not just about anger. It was about a secret I had kept meant to protect her, and a danger she could not yet see. I took a deep breath, holding the key, the letter, the photograph, and realized, and that was only the beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. She crossed her arms, tapping her foot as her gaze locked on me. "You've been lying to me all these years," she said, her voice trembling between anger and hurt. The words hit me harder than I expected. Lying. To my own daughter, I could feel my stomach twist into knots. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out at first. I glanced around the kitchen. The sunlight streamed through the window, catching the dust particles in the air, as if even the room itself was holding its breath. The ordinary tea mug she always drank from sat on the table, but today it seemed heavier, almost accusing. I remembered the nights I spent quietly sorting bills and keeping certain documents hidden, not to deceive her, but to shield her from the truth until the right moment. Her eyes, however, told a different story. They were filled with disbelief and hurt, as if all the sacrifices I made didn't exist. "How could you hide this from me?" she demanded, pointing to a pile of papers I had carefully tucked away the night before. The truth I thought I was protecting had turned into a wall between us, a wall she now saw as betrayal. I felt a pang of guilt, though I knew my intentions had been pure. Silence lingered, almost tangible, as I considered how a simple misunderstanding could unravel decades of trust. This accusation, though sharp, might be the push we needed to finally confront the hidden truths, and yet I couldn't shake the fear that it could also tear us apart entirely. The air seemed thick with tension, the kind that makes every heartbeat echo. I wanted to explain, to show her that honesty and protection were not enemies, but words alone weren't enough. Only actions, only revelations could bridge this gap. I swallowed hard, preparing myself. I knew this confrontation would be the start of something far bigger than a single argument. It wasn't just about the accusation. It was about every hidden secret, every small betrayal she didn't yet understand. And in that moment, I realized this day, her birthday, would mark the first of many revelations that would challenge everything we thought we knew about each other. After a tense silence, my eyes fell on a dusty corner of the bookshelf. There it was, an old photograph, its edges curled and yellowed with age. I picked it up carefully, as if the paper itself might crumble under my fingers. It was a picture of my daughter at 6 years old, sitting on the front porch of our old house, a bright smile lighting her entire face. But there was something else in the photo, a small envelope tucked under her arm with my handwriting faintly visible on it. I couldn't remember ever taking that photo or leaving that envelope there. The ordinary moment captured in that image suddenly felt like a clue, a whisper from the past. The photograph was more than a memory. It was a message I had hidden, a piece of a puzzle she had never seen before. My heart thumped as I realized it could change her perspective, even undo the anger that had filled the room moments ago. She leaned over my shoulder, eyes widening as she recognized herself. I never knew about this," she murmured, a mixture of shock and curiosity softening her tone. That single photograph, an ordinary object turned extraordinary, began to bridge the gap between accusation and understanding. But as I traced the handwriting on the envelope, a chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just an old note, it was a hint of secrets I thought long buried. Who had seen it first? Why had I forgotten it existed? And more importantly, what would happen when the truth behind it came to light? The tension in the room shifted. Silence, that heavy, unsettling pause, hung between us, broken only by the sound of her shallow breaths. For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. Perhaps this photograph, this simple artifact of the past, would become the key to unraveling the lies she accused me of. Or perhaps it was only the beginning of deeper betrayals waiting to surface. And in that instant, I knew our lives were about to change forever. It had been 3 years since my daughter and I truly spoke. 3 years of missed birthdays, awkward holidays, and conversations reduced to polite nods and hollow smiles. The silence had built a wall between us thicker and colder than any argument could ever create. Today, as she stood in front of me, accusing and hurt, that wall felt both fragile and threatening. Fragile because our bond was still there underneath threatening, because one wrong word could shatter what little remained. I remembered the last real conversation we had at her graduation, when I had tried to give advice about life and money. She had smiled politely, but dismissed me with a shrug. I thought she didn't understand, and I gave up trying. Yet here we were 3 years later, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on both of us. I glanced at the photograph I had just found. That small image of her smiling at 6 reminded me of what I had once known her innocence, her trust, the bond that had been unbroken before misunderstandings and fear crept in. And in that realization came the early stakes. I had kept secrets to protect her, but now those secrets threatened to be misunderstood as betrayal. Her arms remained crossed, yet her eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of doubt in her anger. The tension was almost unbearable. I wanted to explain, to tear down the wall, but I also feared that in doing so, I might unleash truths she wasn't ready to hear. Silence, heavy and suffocating, filled the kitchen. Even the ticking clock seemed louder than usual, marking the seconds that could either mend or break us forever. I realized that this moment, painful as it was, carried the weight of every decision I had made in the past 3 years. Each hidden document, each careful omission had led us here, to the fragile intersection of anger and revelation. And as I met her gaze, I knew one thing with certainty. This confrontation was only the first step. Behind it lay secrets, truths, and twists that would challenge everything we thought we knew about family trust and honesty. The real journey was only beginning. As I set the photograph down, my eyes caught the edge of another paper, partially tucked beneath the stack of bills, a letter I hadn't seen before. Its envelope was slightly worn, and the handwriting was unmistakably hers, though not quite like the one she used now. It was smaller, delicate, almost childlike, yet deliberate. I felt a shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just paper, it was a trace of the past, a message that demanded attention. I carefully opened it, unfolding the creased pages. The letter spoke of fears, dreams, and questions she had kept hidden from me for years. Every word carried her voice, a voice I had once known so well, but had barely heard in recent times. The ink smelled faintly of vanilla, the same scent from the candles she loved, instantly transporting me to her childhood bedroom. I could almost see her sitting cross-legged on the floor, carefully writing each sentence as if it held the key to a secret only she could know. I hesitated before showing it to her, realizing that this letter could either mend the rift or deepen it. It hinted at things I had long suspected, questions about inheritance, about family decisions I had made without her knowledge. But it also contained traces of love, trust, and hope, reminders of the bond we had once shared. Her eyes followed mine as I held it out tentatively. The room felt impossibly still, as if even the walls were holding their breath. She leaned closer, and I could see the mixture of curiosity and apprehension in her gaze. I don't remember writing this," she whispered. I nodded, heart pounding. "It's from years ago. I found it today, and I think it explains more than you realize." But the unease didn't leave me. I knew the letter was only a fragment, a clue to deeper secrets that had been carefully buried. Someone or something had orchestrated this silence between us, and the letter was the first crack in that carefully constructed facade. The early stakes were clear: one wrong move, and our fragile reconciliation could shatter completely. I felt a tightening in my chest, a mixture of fear and determination. This letter, simple yet powerful, was more than a piece of paper. It was a key to unlocking the truth, and I had a feeling the revelations it held were just beginning. I returned to the kitchen counter, trying to steady my trembling hands. Among the scattered papers, I spotted something unfamiliar, a folded bank statement partially hidden under a stack of utility bills. My heart skipped a beat. I had gone to great lengths to keep this document safe, certain that its contents were too complex for her to understand without context. Yet now it lay exposed, threatening to turn her curiosity into suspicion. I unfolded it carefully. The numbers, accounts, and transactions told a story that had never been fully shared. Not because of deception, but because I wanted to protect her from the stress of adult responsibilities at a young age. Yet seeing her name in the header made the moment real. My careful protection now looked like secrecy, and perhaps even betrayal, in her eyes. She leaned over, peering at the document, and her lips parted in surprise. Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" Her voice was quiet, but the accusation lingered sharp as a knife. I swallowed hard, feeling the tension tighten between us like a coiled spring ready to snap. The ordinary bank statement had become extraordinary. Each line hinted at decisions made for her hidden investments and plans I had kept secret, hoping one day to reveal them in the right way. But the timing had slipped, leaving a chasm of misunderstanding between us. I met her gaze, trying to convey the truth without words. She saw the fear, the guilt, and the careful intentions behind the paper, yet her eyes reflected doubt, as if she wasn't sure whether she could trust me again. And then I realized the gravity of the situation. This single sheet of paper, unassuming and simple, could either rebuild her trust or destroy the fragile reconciliation I had been desperately trying to achieve. The early stakes had never been higher. Our relationship, our family legacy, and her understanding of my intentions all hung in the balance. I took a deep breath. The hidden bank statement was more than numbers. It was a symbol of choices made in silence, of truths withheld for love rather than deception. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me that this revelation was only the beginning of a journey through secrets, accusations, and truths yet to be uncovered. Her sharp gaze softened just slightly as she stared at the bank statement. I didn't realize you'd done all this for me," she murmured, her voice quieter, almost unsteady. That single shift, subtle as it was, made my chest tighten. After months, no years of silence, that softness felt like a crack in the wall she had built between us. I watched her closely. The anger that had filled her eyes moments ago now mingled with confusion and curiosity. "I always thought you were hiding things from me," she admitted, the tremor in her voice betraying the doubt creeping into her certainty. My heart raced. Finally, a sliver of understanding had pierced her suspicion, but it also hinted at the danger of what she might discover next. The air in the room changed. Even the ordinary kitchen clock seemed to tick more deliberately, marking each second with weight. I could feel the tension, the delicate balance between confrontation and reconciliation. This moment could go either way. She could fully turn against me or begin to see the truth behind my actions. I took a slow, deliberate breath, trying to steady the storm inside me. Her hesitation was a sign, a subtle power shift in our battle of perceptions. The letter, the photograph, the hidden bank statement, all these ordinary objects had become catalysts, pushing our relationship into uncharted territory. Then she paused, biting her lip as she looked away, her voice dropping to a whisper. I don't know what to believe anymore." Those words, raw and vulnerable, carried more weight than any accusation. It was the first real sign that her anger had cracks, that the seeds of doubt I had planted might finally bloom into understanding. But as her tone softened, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that even this fragile moment of connection carried its own danger. Somewhere in the shadows of her doubt, new questions were forming, questions that could uncover more secrets than I had intended. And I knew deep down that what she was about to discover would not only challenge our past, but change the course of our family's future. The doorbell rang just as the silence in the kitchen grew unbearable. My daughter flinched, a hand instinctively rising to her chest. I hadn't expected anyone. Visitors at this hour were rare and certainly not welcome amidst the tension. I opened the door cautiously. Standing there was a man I barely recognized, a distant cousin I hadn't seen in years, holding a manila envelope that looked like it carried the weight of decades. "Is this a bad time?" he asked, though his eyes held a seriousness that immediately made the air feel heavier. My daughter glanced at me, confusion flashing across her features, and for a moment I wondered if she even remembered him. But there was no time for pleasantries. I took the envelope, feeling its rigidity, and sensed that it contained truths we were not yet ready to face. The visitor's presence itself felt like a warning. His arrival wasn't random. There was intention behind it, something carefully orchestrated. I could feel the tension spike, the fragile connection with my daughter teetering on the edge. Every instinct screamed that the envelope contained information that could either reconcile our fractured trust or destroy it completely. She leaned closer, whispering, "Who is he?" I hesitated. The answer was complicated, tied to secrets I had kept to protect her, and yet hiding it now would seem even more suspicious. I swallowed, realizing that this moment had become a crossroads, revelation or ruin. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were documents, old letters, statements, and photographs, all tied to family decisions, hidden assets, and choices I had made in silence. My daughter's eyes widened as she recognized some of the handwriting. I never knew this existed," she whispered, the tremor in her voice betraying a mix of shock and fear. The visitor nodded subtly, as if confirming unspoken truths. "You need to see this," he said softly, his tone carrying an authority I couldn't ignore. In that instant, I understood our confrontation was no longer confined to our small kitchen. The story of hidden decisions, buried secrets, and unspoken intentions was spilling into the open. And as my daughter looked from me to the man, I realized something chilling. The real challenge was just beginning. One unexpected visitor had turned a private confrontation into a larger revelation, and the consequences would ripple through our family in ways none of us could yet predict. As the visitor left, I turned back to the counter and noticed an old key, tarnished and small, lying beside the photograph in the envelope. I'd almost forgotten about it. The label was faint, written in my daughter's childhood handwriting for Mom and Dad. A relic from a simpler time, yet now it carried a weight I hadn't anticipated. I picked it up, feeling the cold metal in my palm. The key wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a symbol, a bridge between past intentions and present misunderstandings. I remembered the day I placed it in that drawer, promising her that one day it would unlock something important, something that would reveal truths carefully kept from her for protection. She watched me closely, curiosity overtaking her lingering anger. "What is it for?" she asked, her voice soft but insistent. I hesitated, knowing that explaining it now might unravel more than she was ready to understand. Yet leaving her in suspense felt impossible. This key, I began choosing my words carefully, was meant to unlock a place I hoped one day you would be ready to see. It's part of a story I never wanted to keep from you, but I feared the timing was wrong. Her eyes widened as she processed my words, a mixture of disbelief, intrigue, and apprehension reflected in her gaze. The kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Ordinary objects, the photograph, the letter, now this key, were conspiring to tell a story of hidden truths and long-held secrets. The tension between us thickened, each revelation a thread pulling us closer to a family history she never knew existed. I felt a shiver run down my spine, not from fear, but from anticipation. The key was more than metal. It was a promise, a warning, and a doorway, all at once. And as my daughter reached for it, her fingers brushing mine, I realized that the next step would take us beyond mere words or accusations. The hidden truths of our family were about to be unlocked, and once that door opened, nothing would ever be the same. Just as I was about to explain the significance of the key, my daughter's husband appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, his usual confident demeanor replaced by unease. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low but urgent. My heart sank. This was not the calm intervention I had hoped for. He stepped inside, glancing nervously between my daughter and me. I wasn't honest with you," he admitted, his hands fidgeting. "I know you think I've been protective, but I may have made things worse." My daughter froze, her eyes narrowing in shock. I could feel the tension spike in the room like static before a storm. His confession wasn't about money, not exactly. It was about manipulation, secrecy, and decisions he had made behind our backs. The realization hit me harder than any accusation I had faced from my daughter. Betrayal had come from an unexpected source, one I had trusted to support her, to bridge the gap between us, not widen it. She looked at him, disbelief and hurt battling in her expression. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice shaking. He swallowed, glancing at me briefly as if seeking permission or perhaps forgiveness. "I may have misled you about the family finances, about certain decisions. To protect you from stress," he admitted, each word heavy with the weight of his own guilt. The ordinary living room had transformed into a courtroom of sorts, every gesture, glance, and word carrying the potential to ignite conflict or reconciliation. I realized that this confession, though painful, was a turning point. It revealed not only his intentions, but also the hidden complexities of family loyalty and deception. Her anger, though softened from earlier, flared again, directed now, not at me, but at him. "You've been controlling everything," she exclaimed. "You lied to me." I could see the struggle in his eyes, the internal battle between justification and shame. And in that tense silence, I understood that the story of our family was not simply about secrets I had kept. It was about everyone's choices, everyone's intentions, and the fragile balance between protection and betrayal. This confession was a spark. And as the tension hung thickly in the room, I knew one thing for certain: the unraveling of our family truths was only just beginning. The visitor, my daughter's husband, had barely finished his confession when I remembered the folder tucked away in the old cabinet, the one I had kept hidden for years. With deliberate caution, I reached for it, the paper stiff under my fingers. Inside was the will, long forgotten by everyone except me, a document that held the truth of intentions, inheritance, and family legacy. I spread the pages on the table, the sunlight catching the edges, making the words feel heavier, more real. Each line revealed what had been misunderstood, each clause clearing me of the accusations my daughter had thrown at me that morning. The truth leapt off the paper. My intentions had never been selfish, nor had I lied to deceive her. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, scanned the document as I guided her through it. You did this for me," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. I knotted my own throat tight. The will was more than paper. It was proof, validation, and the key to restoring a trust I feared was lost forever. The room seemed to pulse with tension and relief all at once. This single revelation, hidden for so long, began to rewrite the narrative that had taken years to complicate. I could see it in her gaze, confusion giving way to understanding, anger melting into recognition. Yet even as relief settled in, a new tension formed. The will clarified my intentions, but it also hinted at secrets she hadn't uncovered yet, decisions made, properties hidden, and events orchestrated to protect her without her knowing. The stakes were higher than ever now she had proof. But the larger story was still unfolding. Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the document, her eyes meeting mine. I didn't realize everything," she murmured. The confession from her husband combined with the will created a fragile bridge between misunderstanding and reconciliation. But the weight of what remained hidden still loomed over us. And as I watched her, I knew that this revelation, as powerful as it was, would not be the end. It was a turning point, a pivot in a story of secrets, betrayal, and love that had been decades in the making. The journey through truth and trust had only just begun. The revelation of the will opened a door I had long hoped would remain closed, for it was not just about finances or inheritance, but about the web of secrets our family had carefully woven over decades. I watched my daughter, her hands clasped tightly as the tension in the room thickened with each unspoken truth. I pulled out an old stack of letters, some yellowed with age, others carefully preserved, all containing confessions, apologies, and admissions from family members I hadn't seen in years. Each piece of paper revealed decisions made without her knowledge, choices meant to protect yet now appearing as deception. My heart pounded. This was the moment when the quiet tension of years exploded into a storm of revelation. Her eyes darted from letter to letter, absorbing information faster than her heart could process. "All this? Why didn't anyone tell me?" she asked, her voice a mixture of shock, hurt, and disbelief. I swallowed hard. "We wanted to protect you," I said softly. "Some truths we feared would overwhelm you." Yet the unraveling did not stop there. Among the letters I found hints of hidden family disputes, disagreements over property, and moments of silent betrayal that no one had ever voiced aloud. Each revelation added layers to the tension, threads of mistrust, concealed intentions, and choices made behind closed doors. I could see her shifting in her chair, trying to process the magnitude of what she was learning. Silence hung heavily in the room, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of paper. This was no longer just about accusations or a misunderstanding. It was about uncovering decades of carefully hidden family history, each secret threatening to destabilize the fragile trust we had begun to rebuild. And as I met her gaze, I realized something crucial. Unveiling the truth was not just about clarifying the past. It was about preparing her for decisions she would have to make, for the understanding that the family she thought she knew was far more complicated, far more intricate than any of us had dared to admit. The morning that began with anger and accusation had now transformed into a labyrinth of secrets, each revelation both shocking and inevitable. And I knew deep in my bones that the real challenge, navigating the consequences of these uncovered truths, was only just beginning. Her eyes went wide and her hands trembled as she sank into the chair. The stack of letters, the hidden bank statement, and the revelation of the will had crashed over her like a tidal wave. I can't believe this," she whispered, her voice breaking. Shock mingled with disbelief, her body rigid with the sudden weight of truth she had never imagined. I watched her carefully, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. Every instinct in me screamed that words could either calm the storm or ignite it further. She had accused me of lies, of betrayal, of deception, but now the reality was far more complicated than either of us had anticipated. The truth was a tangled web, and she was only beginning to see its threads. Her face went pale as she picked up one of the older letters, tracing the handwriting with a shaky finger. Memories, both hers and mine, seemed to flood the room, the forgotten birthday gifts, the secret sacrifices, the decisions I had made quietly to protect her from harm. It was overwhelming, the collision of past intentions with present misunderstandings. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked again, almost accusingly, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her confusion. I took a slow breath, letting the silence speak as much as my words could. "I wanted to in time," I said softly, "but I feared the truth would hurt you before you were ready." For a moment, she simply stared at me, absorbing each word like a wave, retreating and returning with more force. The shock in her expression was not just about the documents, it was about realizing how much she had misunderstood, how her assumptions had blinded her to the intentions behind my actions. And as I watched her, I understood the fragile beauty of the moment. Shock, though painful, had opened the door to understanding. It was a necessary step, a bridge between accusation and reconciliation, between anger and the possibility of forgiveness. But even in that moment, I knew the journey was far from over. The secrets we had uncovered were only part of the story, and the true test of trust and family bonds was yet to come. I led her to the old side gate behind the garden, my hands trembling slightly as I held the rusted key. The key I had discovered earlier suddenly felt heavier in my palm, as if it carried not just metal and memory, but the weight of decades of untold secrets. She followed her footsteps, hesitant, every creak of the wooden floor echoing in the silent house. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer immediately, instead sliding the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, surprisingly easily, as though it had been waiting for this exact moment. The door creaked open, revealing a space she had never seen before, a small hidden house tucked behind our main home, preserved as though frozen in time. Inside, sunlight filtered through dusty windows, illuminating furniture covered with white sheets. Books stacked neatly in corners and objects from our past that I had never shown her. The air smelled faintly of old wood and lavender, a scent I remembered from her grandmother's home. She stepped inside, eyes wide with disbelief. You've been keeping this?" she asked, her voice tinged with awe and confusion. I nodded slowly. "It was always meant for you," I explained. "A place you could claim one day, a sanctuary from the complications of life. I wanted you to discover it when the time was right." She turned slowly, taking in every detail. The hidden house was more than a structure. It was a testament to my intentions, a silent monument to care and foresight. Yet even as wonder replaced initial shock, I could sense a subtle shift in her expression, a mix of curiosity, hesitation, and a lingering shadow of suspicion. The discovery was staggering, but I knew the hidden wealth it represented wasn't just in bricks or money. It was in the acknowledgement of trust, of intentions revealed, and of secrets laid bare. And as she finally touched the smooth surface of an old wooden table, I realized that the revelation of this house would mark a turning point. One hidden treasure had unlocked another layer of understanding and another layer of tension, hinting at more truths waiting to emerge. And in that moment, I knew with certainty what she had uncovered was only a fragment of the family story, and the deeper revelations, the ones that could heal or shatter us, were still ahead. Just as we were stepping back from the hidden house, my phone rang. The ringtone sliced through the quiet afternoon like a warning bell. I glanced at the screen, an unfamiliar number. My daughter watched me, curiosity mixed with lingering suspicion in her eyes. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hello," I said. A calm, measured voice replied. "Mr. Your last name. I'm calling from the law office regarding your late father's estate." My heart tightened. I hadn't expected any calls today, and the mention of my father immediately raised the stakes. I gestured for my daughter to stay close. The lawyer continued. "There are matters that require immediate attention, documents that may affect the property and assets you currently hold. We've discovered discrepancies in prior filings, and it's crucial that you review them." Her eyes widened. "Discrepancies? What kind?" she asked. Her tone carried both concern and incredulity. I swallowed hard. I had known that the hidden house, the will, and other family assets might eventually come under scrutiny, but not this soon, and certainly not in such a sudden external way. The ordinary phone call had transformed into an urgent warning. I could feel the weight of time pressing down. Every choice I had made to protect her, every secret I had kept, was now about to be tested by forces beyond our family. The hidden wealth, once a quiet gift, had suddenly become a potential battleground. The lawyer's voice remained calm but firm. "Please review the documents we've sent immediately and contact our office if any clarification is needed. Some of the assets, including a property previously unaccounted for, may require immediate legal action." I looked at my daughter. The shock in her eyes mirrored my own internal tension. This was no longer just a personal revelation or family drama. It was now a legal and financial challenge, one that could validate my actions or cast them in doubt. And as I ended the call, I realized that our journey into hidden truths had just expanded beyond the walls of our home. The stakes were higher than ever, and the path ahead was filled with uncertainty, tension, and the promise of more revelations yet to come. I took a deep breath, letting the phone call sink in when my daughter finally spoke. "I don't understand. All of this, why you hid things, why everyone acted like I shouldn't know." Her voice trailed off, heavy with confusion and lingering hurt. I motioned for her to sit beside me. "I know it looks like deception," I began gently, "but it wasn't meant that way. Every choice, every document I kept from you was to protect you, not betray you. I wanted to spare you unnecessary worry while ensuring the family's legacy remained intact." Her brow furrowed. "But hiding things even to protect me? It felt like lies," she said softly, still wary. I nodded, admitting the truth. "Yes, I understand, and I realize now how it must have seemed. But sometimes protection takes the form of silence, and it's a silence that can be easily misunderstood." I reached for the photograph and the letters, showing them to her again. "See these, the bank statements, the letters from relatives, even the will. Everything was meant to safeguard you. The hidden house, the key, the documents, they were all part of a plan. Not to deceive, but to ensure you could discover them when you were ready." She took a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing. Her eyes met mine with a hint of understanding, but the wariness lingered. "So, you weren't lying?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, I was trying to protect you, but I failed to explain, and for that I am truly sorry." Even as clarity began to seep in, a faint unease remained. Suspicion had been planted over years, and while some of it was fading, the consequences of long-held secrets were not so easily undone. Every revelation had its ripple effect, and while this explanation helped, it also hinted at deeper layers yet to surface. The ordinary kitchen, the hidden house, the letters, and even the phone call. They all combined to tell a story of intention, sacrifice, and misunderstood choices. And in that fragile understanding, I realized the delicate balance of trust and reconciliation was beginning to shift. But the full truth, with its twists and potential betrayals, was still unfolding. Just as a fragile understanding began to settle between us, a new realization hit me like a punch to the chest. The true betrayal wasn't what my daughter had accused me of. It wasn't even the half-truths or hidden documents. It was someone else entirely, someone I had trusted implicitly. Her husband shifted nervously, glancing between us. That glance was all it took. "It wasn't just me," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "There's been manipulation, behind the scenes, from someone very close." My daughter froze. Who would do this?" Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. I could feel her pulse racing, the tension in the room skyrocketing. I swallowed hard. It was time to reveal the truth, the shocking betrayal that had orchestrated so much of the confusion and suspicion over the years. I took a deep breath. "It was your uncle," I said slowly. "He's been influencing decisions, hiding assets, and making you believe certain things, all while pretending to help." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Her eyes widened, disbelief mixing with anger. "My uncle," she whispered. "But why?" I shook my head, feeling the weight of every misstep. Power, control, and perhaps resentment. He wanted to manipulate the family, create conflict, and ensure that trust was shattered. He used your assumptions, our silence, and even his own actions to keep you from discovering the truth. Her face paled. She looked to her husband, then back at me, as if trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. Every revelation we had uncovered, the letters, the hidden house, the will, now made sense in a new, darker context. Someone had been pulling strings all along, orchestrating misunderstandings to keep us divided. The ordinary kitchen felt charged with tension. Every object, now a reminder of the hidden manipulations, the letters, the photographs, the key, the documents, all symbols of a betrayal we hadn't fully grasped until this moment. I reached out, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We've discovered the truth, but now we must act carefully. This betrayal, it doesn't define us, but it does explain much of the pain and confusion." And in that charged silence, I realized one thing with crystal clarity: the storm was far from over. The true betrayal had been revealed, but the consequences, the ripple effects across our family, were just beginning to unfold. That evening, the tension followed us to the dining room. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread could not mask the unease thick in the air. My daughter sat across from me, her eyes sharp, her hands clenched around her napkin. The hidden house, the letters, the will, and the shocking revelation about her uncle hung between us like an invisible wall. Her husband tried to break the silence. "We need to talk," he said cautiously. But his words barely had an effect. The weight of our family's secrets was too heavy. I caught my daughter's gaze, and I could see the storm raging behind her eyes. Anger, confusion, hurt, and betrayal all intermingled in a dangerous mix. "You lied to me!" she finally erupted, her voice shaking yet loud enough to echo through the room. "You all, everyone, how could I have believed you? How could you hide so much?" She pointed toward me, then to her husband, then glanced at the unopened letters on the counter. Each of us sat frozen, aware that this was the moment truth collided with emotion. I tried to explain, my voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. "I never lied to hurt you," I said. "Every decision, every hidden document, every choice I made, it was to protect you, to prepare you. But now, after years of misunderstanding, the truth is out, and I hope you can see my intentions." Her uncle's manipulations had set this stage, yet now the family confrontation was ours to navigate. She turned sharply to her husband. "And you? Why didn't you tell me? Were you part of this too?" His hesitation revealed the partial truth. He had tried to shield her, but his own fear of conflict had kept him silent. The silence was deafening. Every sound, the clinking of silverware, the hum of the refrigerator, was magnified by the tension. My daughter's chest heaved with emotion, and her voice trembled as she whispered, I don't know what to believe anymore." I reached across the table, placing a hand over hers, and for the first time in years, I felt a small shift, an acknowledgement that the confrontation, painful as it was, might be the first step toward understanding. But even in this fragile moment, I knew the dinner would not resolve everything. The revelations, the betrayals, the hidden truths, they were far from fully uncovered. And deep down, I understood that this confrontation was not the conclusion. It was merely the ignition point of a deeper reckoning. After the storm of accusations at dinner, the room settled into a heavy, almost fragile silence. My daughter sat quietly staring at the untouched plate before her, her hands folded in her lap. For the first time, I noticed the tremor in her shoulders, the way her chest rose and fell with unspoken emotion. She wasn't angry anymore, at least not fully, but the shock of truths unveiled had left her vulnerable, exposed, and trying to make sense of everything. I sat beside her, careful not to speak immediately. Silence, I realized, had a power words sometimes lack. It allowed for reflection, for emotions to settle into a form that could be understood. The letters, the hidden house, the bank statements, the will, even the manipulations by her uncle, they all weighed heavily on her, but in that quiet moment, I sensed a shift. She glanced at me, her eyes softer, less accusing. I didn't realize how much you were trying to protect me," she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her vulnerability opened a door I hadn't dared hope for. I nodded gently. "I only ever wanted what was best for you," I replied, even if I didn't always know the right way to show it. The ordinary kitchen table, now still after the confrontation, became a symbol of understanding. Every object, the letters, the envelope, the key, the document stood as proof of intentions, love, and cautious foresight. I could feel the tension easing, slowly transforming into empathy, and the beginnings of trust restored. But even as relief settled in, I knew the path ahead remained complicated. There were still secrets to uncover, explanations to provide, and confrontations to face. Silent understanding was merely the bridge, and acknowledgement that while we were beginning to see the truth, the full journey of reconciliation was far from complete. She exhaled slowly, her hands unclenching, her gaze lingering on the photograph from years ago. "I think I'm beginning to understand," she murmured. And in that small statement, I felt hope, the hope that even the deepest misunderstandings could eventually give way to connection, trust, and the possibility of forgiveness. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I knew one thing for certain: our story, complicated and twisted as it was, still had more layers to reveal. And the journey into truth was far from over. As the quiet settled over the house, my eyes fell on a small box tucked away on the bookshelf. It had been there for years unnoticed, yet its presence now seemed deliberate, as if time itself had waited for this moment. The box was unremarkable from the outside, but when I opened it, the contents revealed a gift from the past, a delicate locket worn and slightly tarnished, engraved with my daughter's initials. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of history. It was more than jewelry. It was a symbol of care, a fragment of a memory long forgotten, a tangible reminder of the bond we had once shared and the love that had persisted despite years of silence. She leaned closer, curiosity softening her features, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of trust in her eyes. "This? I remember this?" She whispered, her fingers hovering over the locket as though afraid to touch it. "You gave it to me when I was little." She paused, her voice trembling. I think I finally understand why you hid certain things from me. It wasn't out of malice. It was love." The ordinary object had transformed into a moral mirror. It reminded us both that intentions, even when misunderstood, carried meaning. The years of silence, the hidden documents, the letters, and the house, they were all attempts to protect her, to shield her from unnecessary harm. And in this moment, the past and present converged. Yet even as understanding grew, I could sense the tension still lingering, subtle but undeniable. The gift didn't erase the pain, the anger, or the manipulations we had uncovered. It merely provided a path toward reflection and empathy. I placed the locket gently in her hand, feeling the fragility of the moment. She closed her fingers around it, holding it like a promise. And in the quiet, I realized that small gestures, ordinary objects, and long-forgotten gifts could carry more weight than words ever could. The gift from the past had opened a door, one that would lead to reconciliation, moral reflection, and the final revelation still waiting to emerge. And I knew deep in my heart that this moment was another turning point, a step closer to truth, understanding, and perhaps healing. After holding the locket in her hand for what felt like an eternity, my daughter exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging as though she had been carrying a burden far too heavy for years. Her eyes glistened, reflecting a mixture of sorrow, relief, and newfound understanding. I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. I froze for a moment, stunned. The words, so simple and yet so profound, carried more weight than any explanation, any letter, any document ever could. She had accused me of lies, betrayal, and deception, but now in her apology I heard recognition, remorse, and the first real step toward reconciliation. "I shouldn't have doubted you," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I should have asked. I should have trusted instead of assuming the worst, all these years." I let anger blind me. Her hands rested on mine now, the gesture hesitant but genuine. I could feel the tension melting slowly, replaced by a fragile warmth. The ordinary living room seemed to breathe with us, the echoes of past accusations softening. Every object, the letters, the hidden house, the bank statements, even the locket had contributed to this delicate moment. They had been witnesses to misunderstandings, bearers of secrets, and now instruments of healing. "I know it won't erase everything," she said softly, "but I want to try. To understand, to forgive, and to rebuild." Her words carried a vulnerability that pierced through the remaining tension. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "That's all I've ever wanted," I replied. "To be understood, to rebuild what we've lost." Even as emotion settled, I could feel the undercurrent of suspense lingering. The sense that not all truths had yet been revealed, that the journey through betrayal, secrets, and hidden wealth was far from complete. But for the first time in a long time, a fragile bridge of trust and understanding had formed between us. And in that quiet, heartfelt apology, I realized something profound. Forgiveness was not a conclusion, but a choice. A step forward in a story still unfolding, one that held more revelations, more surprises, and more lessons waiting just ahead. After her apology, the atmosphere in the house shifted subtly, like the first light of dawn breaking through a stormy night. My daughter sat beside me, her hands still intertwined with mine, and I could see the beginnings of peace in her eyes. But the journey wasn't just hers. It belonged to the entire family. We gathered around the dining table once more, this time with a sense of cautious hope. My son-in-law, who had confessed his part in the misunderstandings, now looked remorseful, yet relieved. Even my daughter's younger siblings, who had been distant witnesses to the long-standing tension, joined the conversation, their faces reflecting curiosity, concern, and tentative optimism. "I think we've all been carrying secrets," my daughter said softly, her voice steadying. "And maybe it's time we stop letting them control us." Her words hung in the air like a fragile promise. I nodded, sensing the weight of the past and the possibility of a shared future. The hidden house, once a symbol of secrecy, now became a bridge, a place where we could gather, reflect, and begin anew. The letters, the documents, and even the key had played their part, guiding us toward understanding. The tension that had gripped the room for so long began to loosen, replaced by cautious laughter, tentative smiles, and quiet conversations. Yet even as we reconciled, I could sense the lingering shadows of past manipulations, the uncle's betrayal, the hidden wealth, and the documents that had only recently come to light. Reconciliation was not about erasing the past, it was about acknowledging it, learning from it, and choosing to move forward together. By the end of the evening, we were no longer merely a family fractured by misunderstanding and secrecy. We were a family aware of the depth of our bonds, the complexity of trust, and the power of truth revealed at the right moment. For now, the storm had passed, leaving calm, but I knew the journey was not yet complete. And in that moment, as I watched my daughter's tentative smile, I realized that family reconciliation was not the end. It was the preparation for the revelations still waiting in the shadows, the twists still to come, and the lessons still to be learned. Just as the evening seemed to settle into calm, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen, a message from an unknown number. My daughter leaned closer, curiosity flickering across her face. I hesitated, feeling a familiar chill of unease. The calm we had worked so hard to achieve suddenly felt fragile, like glass about to crack. The message was simple, but devastating. A photograph attached showing someone from our family, someone I had trusted meeting with a lawyer I didn't recognize. The caption read, "There are more decisions you weren't told about." My chest tightened. This was no ordinary message, it was a warning, a spark threatening to ignite hidden fires yet again. My daughter's eyes widened as she saw it. "Who? Who is that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of dread and urgency. "It seems there are more secrets," I admitted, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. The revelation reminded us that even after apologies, reconciliations, and discoveries, the family's story was far from complete. Her hands trembled slightly as she held my arm. "But after everything, how can there still be more?" she asked, her voice filled with both fear and anticipation. I shook my head. Sometimes uncovering one truth only reveals another. We have seen only a fraction of what has been hidden. The story, it's far from over. The ordinary living room, once a sanctuary, now felt like the stage for another act, another twist in a narrative that had already tested our trust, love, and patience. Every letter, key, photograph, and document had brought us here, but even they were only pieces of a larger puzzle we had yet to solve. As we sat together, the weight of the unknown pressing in, I realized something. Family is a living story filled with secrets, betrayals, and unexpected gifts. And even when we think the lessons are learned, the next twist can arrive without warning, challenging everything we thought we understood. And in that moment, I knew one undeniable truth. The unexpected twist had arrived, and the next chapter of revelations and the ultimate test of trust was still ahead. The house was quiet now, the chaos of revelations and confrontations slowly settling into a fragile calm. I sat in the living room, the letters and documents still spread around me like pieces of a puzzle that had only begun to make sense. My daughter rested beside me, her hand lightly touching mine, a silent acknowledgement that we were on the path to understanding. I reflected on everything that had unfolded, the accusations, the hidden house, the will, the letters, and the manipulations. Every secret we had uncovered, every misstep and misunderstanding had taught me something profound. Honesty and intention matter more than perception, and love often speaks in silence before words ever arrive. The journey had been painful, even terrifying at times. We had faced betrayal, fear, and anger, yet in the midst of it I saw the resilience of family bonds. Even fragile trust, when approached with patience and courage, can begin to mend. The ordinary objects around us, the photograph, the key, the locket, had become symbols of connection, proof that intentions, even hidden, carry meaning. But as I looked at my daughter's thoughtful expression, I knew the story was far from over. Life had a way of revealing truths layer by layer, and the secrets we had yet to uncover would continue to test us. Forgiveness, understanding, and reconciliation were steps, not the destination. Each revelation prepared us for the next, each twist a reminder that nothing is ever truly settled. And as the sun set behind the trees, casting long shadows through the windows, I realized that the journey through truth, trust, and family would continue one secret at a time. And that was only the beginning. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it touched you, please subscribe and continue with the next story in the playlist.